Hey guys, welcome again to our continued webinar series. I'll let Ashita start and we take up the next webinar. Yeah.
Hi everyone, very good afternoon. Hope you're having a great Saturday. Welcome to our session. So today we're going to discuss about is blockchain a missing piece to make Asia the next superpower? And we have Rohit here to help us with the questions we have today. Over to you, Rohit.
All right, thank you so much. The idea of this webinar, particularly is slightly different from the ones that we have done in the past. So till now, as you would have noticed, we have mostly dealt on the technical front and also the business application side, right? So we've covered both sides of the equation. We've seen how, in a couple of cases, in the first few webinars, what are the real world business applications of blockchain, right? And then we also delved into, how cryptocurrency is really shaping up, right? So this time I thought, let's do something different, and I think that's how we came to the topic of Asia specifically. That how is geography playing a role, and is it really helping Asia in some context? So yeah.
So I have my first question
Sure.
here. With data being a new oil, how blockchain can help Asian countries to better use of this data?
Sure. Good question. So I think first of all, data being the new oil is something which I have always found to be a misnomer, so to say. And the reason for that is, people think that okay, like if you could take exactly the analog, like data being the new oil, you cannot technically store data and make just one copy of it, right? Because by default, if you notice, most of the times, right, data always exists in bundles, right?
Yeah.
So it is by default replicated across multiple geographies and places, right? So so if you take that context, right, I mean, data equal to new oil feels like slightly wrong, so to say, right? But yes, on the face of it, it is definitely valuable, almost as valuable as oil was, in the 90s, 80s, 70s, starting off. And now, given that we can technically store data and sell data, which is what all the advertising companies are doing, right, including Facebook and WhatsApp, right, to some extent. So from that context, yes, partially that will be true. Now, if you take the context of Asia, what happens is that let us say Asia has, on an average, I think around 3 times the population, or maybe 4 times the population as compared to the developed world, right, the Western world. That is all the Americas combined. So just from that data point alone, you can see that the volume of data magnifies exponentially. Right? So data does not scale linearly in terms of number of people or the number of touch points. Data actually goes exponentially. So for example, if you have, let's take a very simple example. If you have 2 people, these 2 people will exchange data in a one-to-one manner. So it's like just 2 phones chatting with each other, that's it. Right? So data point exists only in those 2 phones. But if you have like 3 people, you can see that conversations can happen in 6 ways, right? Not in 3 ways. Right? So it's not linearly, right? It's actually going exponentially over time. So now, just from the simple example, you can guess that the volume of data that Asia can produce, right, will be magnanimous, right, and will overshadow what America has done or any developed country has done till now. Right? And that is why, if you notice, all these developed companies are taking so much interest in Asia and India specifically, right, because of such a huge population. So the scope is immense. Of course, it also requires great execution. Right? It's not just the scope and the idea that matters in this case. So the key question then comes in, okay, then how do we really make a strong execution case, right, for Asia to leverage blockchain? Specifically speaking about blockchain, data is obviously the first base of it. Now, given that we've established there will be so much data and we need a good way to manage it, the question then comes is really blockchain the answer to it? From my point, yes, it is. The reason being, if you really keep the data records of, say, 1 billion people, right? In India, you have roughly 1 billion people, right? 1.3 almost. And let's say take the Aadhaar records or phone numbers or anything of that sort, right? Proprietary information, and keep it in a way one single centralized place, right? You can imagine what kind of a ticking time bomb it will be, right? I mean, it's like somebody gets access to that data, literally the whole country is compromised, right? And it's not something to be taken for granted. So the government is obviously actively thinking for that, and they should at this point. I mean, everyone from Chinese to Russians, everybody they are definitely trying to infiltrate at some point or level. Obviously, they will not say it out openly, but there are a lot of hackers out there in these countries which try to get into, especially the Asian and Indian democracies, try to get access and leverage. So yes, I mean, if you really decentralize the data and make it auditable using blockchain, you can prevent all of these threats that Asia could have in the future. And not just that, that also makes sure that you are safeguarded and bulletproof for the next future generations, right? Because a strong foundation that you set today will be important for the future generations. Right? So from that point, yes, I mean, I am very excited and eager to see how Asia takes it.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, could blockchain give a new boost up by facilitating PNP and PNP network amongst the organization?
So by PNP, you mean a P2P network?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. So absolutely. I think let's take this example again, like the whole data sharing of a billion people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have all the Aadhaar numbers and phone numbers, right, of a billion people stored somewhere, currently with UIDI or different organizations. Right now, it's only UIDI. Now, if you take phone number as a base, as a unique identifying parameter, right now, phone number is enough to identify who it belongs to. Right? So using that phone number, people have, like, the country has already created next level payments platform that is UPI. So you can technically identify somebody with a phone number, transfer the money, and done. But what you cannot do at this point is that you cannot see the full trail records or the full history of those transactions of that particular person, right? You can see it localized in mind. Like, for example, you can see, okay, this person has transacted on UPI, right, on so and so dates, right? But that information is private. Right? Only NPCI would have that, right? The central UPI governing body. So if you take UPI as an example, or any payments for as an example, the data is always localized in private. It is not really decentralized or made available to the public, or even made available to other organizations. So from a P2P perspective, right, the idea is that if you're really doing a true P2P transfer, the information should only flow from P to the other P. Like, there should not be any intermediary. Right now, what happens when you're doing an NEFT or an IMPS transaction, your money and your information always flows to the bank, right? Because the bank is the one facilitating that.
Yeah.
And I mean, their defense is, okay, that we are the ones giving the service, so we have to have the data, right? So, which is fine for now. But then eventually, I mean, if you consider what UPI aims to do is exactly the opposite. Right? It wants to take the bank out of the equation, right? And say, okay, that can you send money from one unique ID to another unique ID instantly, right? Without any intermediary. So, and taking it a step further, without storing it at any other place, right? So if you store the data just at the sender and the recipient end, that is what makes real P2P decentralized transaction, right? Because then both the peers, the sender and the recipient, they can be confident that yes, my data is not being misused because I know the recipient, I know who I am, right? So I know where the data is stored. So I don't need to really worry about where other points are. So yeah. So I think from that point, yes, P2P eventually will be changed, and most likely it will happen with fintech. Hence my T-shirt as well. Yeah, I think, and it's already happening. I mean, cryptocurrency is the perfect example for this, right? People are already using tokens to send money to each other, and of course, there are legal hassles right now around the world, but a lot of governments are fighting that battle, and hopefully, I think we'll reach that.
So blockchain is still in a fledgling state now.
Yeah.
So how can you think Asian countries can make use of the blockchain in a better way?
Sure. So the advantage that the Asian countries have, one we already discussed, which is the population advantage. Now it's also a disadvantage as well, right, in certain sense, because then you have so much pressure on your resources. But then at the same time, the advantage is in terms of data, and especially it becomes paramount in this stage because if you notice, across the world, superpowers have been built or super economies have been built on some fundamentals. Like, let's go back in time. Let's go back to the early 18th century, right, when the Industrial Revolution was happening. So at that time, Europe, Britain were becoming the superpowers. Now, how are they becoming the superpowers? Because they were inventing physical stuff. Like, they were inventing steam engines, rolling press, printing press, and all, everything, right? So that was like real world physical invention that was really making them a superpower at that particular time. And since technology follows an S curve, this is something you notice that always something reaches a certain point of popularity, goes down, and then comes up again, right? In the form of a different technology. So if you take the form of computing, you had personal computers, now went down, now you have computers like laptops and tablets, right? Or phones, right? So it's almost like that, always. Similarly, phones will go down over time and maybe you will have just watching them classes, nothing else, right? So if you take that analog across history, so industrial revolution, then you have the green revolution, right? Farm revolution, right? In the US, you had capitalist revolution, right? Whole financial markets, right? Which these guys really led to the whole boom on Wall Street, so to say. So you can see that Britain, Europe, and then US, they had their heydays and they had to invent physical stuff and go through these revolutions to become a superpower, right? And that is why you have a certain lifestyle which is there in the country. Now, if India or Asia needs to reach that level, they don't really need to copy it because now time has changed. Right? Now, we don't really need to always have physical stuff or physical revolution to reach a particular level in terms of economy. For example, right now, most of the powerful companies in the world, they don't own physical assets. They own data, like Facebook, Amazon, right? WhatsApp, Google. So they're not really inventing physical stuff. You can buy hardware right, from Facebook. You can't buy hardware from WhatsApp, but it is worth $19 billion, right? Because it has data, right? So the railroads of power have changed from literally the physical railroads to digital railroads, right? So now it's more like people who have the more digital footprint are the ones that are most powerful. So I think Asia should just focus on that particular thing, right? Just take a leaf out of that playbook and say that, okay, the physical world is past. Let the infrastructure be there, obviously. Infrastructure should be there. That's a given thing. But that does not mean that the next superpower will be built only on infrastructure. It will be built because you have a digital infrastructure. You have more data, more power, more computing power. That's what you get.
Okay. Yeah, I am done with the questions. Let's look at the audience questions. Do you think slow speed of adoption is because there are not many plug and play solutions? So companies are forced to have their own internal blockchain team or use a third party service provider.
So there might be blockchain team. That's a good question. Yeah. So in fact, if you notice, like I think in the third party solution providers on blockchain, you either have the enterprise scale, which is IBM, right? So if a company is pretty big and it needs a very heavy artillery and a very heavy infrastructure, which a company like IBM can provide, that is when the solution comes in. Right? On the other hand, then you also have the AWS level solution, right, which is more like an easier level, right, for especially made for startups and companies that are new to the world or new to the technology world. For them, AWS is still okay, right? Especially if they have tech know-how or they have developers in-house. But yes, I think due to these two factors, we have not seen that high pace of adoption. And this is also similar to the way internet was, right? When internet came around, right, in 90s, this is a classic analog which we almost share every time, right? That blockchain is pretty much similar to internet in terms of the history, right, and the way it evolved. So when internet came around, initially, internet was only used by the government agencies or universities, right? Primarily because the small companies, small agencies, or small just these SMEs, they really did not have tech know-how, and they really did not know how to leverage, internet. Same is happening now. So even right now, blockchain is more heavy on the university front. There are a lot of universities who are providing training programs. We are working with a lot of them. Then big companies, IBM, AWS, Tech Mahindra, they are doing both in-house and out-house solutions. But yes, I mean, you won't see many small companies right now. So in order to increase that pace of adoption, definitely I agree we need a plug and play network, right? And the sole reason for that is, if you notice, like the real power of content, just to take an example, the real power of content came around to the world when people were able to write blogs from get-go without coding. Like right now, you can write a blog on Medium, WordPress, anywhere, pretty much, right? And you don't need to know coding. Right? You can just take it, plug and play, add your content, add photos, done. Right? So now that is why you see so many awesome blogs out there, so many awesome magazines out there, right? And so many publishers out there. So that power of adoption, if you're talking about, yes, I mean that will need a plugin association for sure.
Okay.
Cool. I think do we have any more questions here? Wait till the time they come in. I have a question for you, by the way.
Okay.
So remember, I think a few webinars back we discussed around what is the first question that people ask when we tell them about when you tell them about blockchain. This people, I mean layman people who don't know about blockchain in general. So I think you had mentioned that one was that how is it working with the government framework, because most of people are swayed by the media, right? And they think that it's crypto is illegal, right? That's all. Right? So that was one. I think. So do you think that has changed over, like, say, past 4 or 5 months? Like now people are becoming more aware. Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So
and many of my friends who are into engineering, like into IT. So they asked me, can I also take up this blockchain
okay,
course?
nice.
I told, yeah, we both went through your courses, training,
Sure.
So you can take it.
Awesome. That would be interesting.
One of my friends, he is into DevOps, development and operations, so he's really interested in it.
Awesome. Cool. I'll check it out. All right, guys. I think we don't have any more questions for now. Yeah. So we'll stop the webinar here.
You can write us at admin@birthvenue.in, and also you can drop your comment on the YouTube videos.
Right, absolutely. And ping us on Facebook page, Twitter. We are very responsive there. So and the reason for keeping this short is that we're now experimenting with a new format. So we'll try to keep it more like a 20-minute, 15-20-minute quick webinar, and then 10 minutes Q&A, right? Instead of keeping it very long. So hope you like this one. Give us feedback. I'm looking forward to see you next time.
Yeah, thank you.